Welcome to another podcast, Encrypted Minds. My name is Edwin Karlas, founder of Level Up Sales Consultancy. The podcast about entrepreneurs and experts in software. And today I have Terry Ivanov. Terry Ivanov, I mentioned seasoned. You are not only a seasoned software expert, but also seasoned in logistics, right?
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
correct.
Terry, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Terry Ivanov, Logistics Technology Advisor, worked for transportation companies in the past. I spent last 6 years working for tech company, UTECH Global LLC. We out of, west suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. And we're mostly focusing on the technology that our customers that are being carriers, in our specific case, use. So companies, what do we call them? And asset-based companies that are essentially the ones that own their equipment, ones that are responsible for hiring drivers, and the one that actually taking your shipment from point A to point B. And we are the ones that actually create the technology. We built from scratch a technology that has to do with management software specifically. That is myself. I'm directly involved into the structure of operations and product. This is product part of it for a product called UNIQ TMS. We're essentially a management software technology that allows carriers to handle their operation. Anything from, basic stuff like a load entry all the way to driver settlement to, integration with third party providers, whatever that might be that, required in a day-to-day operational stuff. We as a company, UTECH, we also have other products, specifically also has to do with transportation, obviously. One of them is called GPS Tab. That is essentially a technology that allows truck drivers to stay compliant and legal and allows to keep track of their hours on the road. Essentially, there's rules and regulations to how many hours drivers can drive, right? The amount of time, the amount of breaks they can take throughout the day, so on and so forth. And that's a technology that allows them to stay legal and compliant on the road. And along with it, there are a few other things like, responsible for telematics, uh, such as cameras and other equipment trackers that goes along essentially with the technology.
No. So if I understand correctly, so it is from a carrier perspective, and carriers can be not only truck driver, it can be other logistics companies as well.
Precisely, yes. So any logistics company that is responsible for picking up and delivering the load. And a lot of people think of logistics companies as brokers as well. We specifically do not focus on brokers. We focus on transportation companies themselves. The ones that are, like I said, they have physical presence of their equipment. So they're the ones actually loading your cargo in the trailer. They're the ones actually, hiring the driver, taking your load from point A to point B. And there's a significant difference between a logistics company that is responsible for, transporting goods from point A to point B, being the broker. They're essentially just a company that hires the actual logistics company, right? And but we're the ones that we're working with the asset-based logistics company. So our tool is specifically designed to handle the needs of transportation companies that are the ones that hauling your shipment, not the ones that brokering your shipment. And surprisingly enough, there's a big difference between those two. And in the terms of technology, it requires a lot of different segments to kind of work differently in order to handle the needs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you mentioned also this management software. So
correct.
both it's for the owners of the management of these transportation companies, the assets driving around. But you also mentioned that for the drivers to be compliant. So it's not only a management tool; it's also a supporting tool for drivers.
Both tools kind of go along with one another together. However, the biggest difference is the ELD tool, the GPS step specifically. That's a tool that is, there's many other on the market. Like I'm sure you're familiar with companies like Samsara and Motive. In fact, they're present in Europe now. They're the biggest players in the industry. GPS tab is essentially an electronic login device. We do not manufacture our own hardware, but we do produce our own software, right? So that's a tool that is used by any trucking company for them to legally drive and be present on the road in the United States. They must comply with the certain laws and regulations. Therefore, they must obtain an ALD of some sort for themselves to have, right? Because they need to comply with the laws that are, I believe, went into effect in 2017. There's a whole you know long story about the when the law was accepted first and then when it was enforced and so on and so forth. We're not going to go too deep in that. The difference in between that ELDs are required by law. You must have one in order to essentially to get on the road and to begin driving, right? Either for yourself, if you're driving for the company, or you're driving for yourself, you must have an ELD. You cannot legally be on the road without it. However, transportation management software, UNIQ TMS, by the way it's spelled, it's UNIQ TMS. So it's a transportation management software. It's a pretty, you know, complex software that essentially is not required. Nobody's required to have, right? But if you are a growing company, if you are a company that is, trying to scale, when I'm saying growing company, I mean like if you have, 10 to 15 units trucks on the road and growing, management software becomes somewhat of a essential thing to have. The reason being because you have a lot of moving parts. You have everything from uh, basic order acceptance, data entry. You have you know dozens of drivers, right? You got bunch of paperwork on the side of the driver's compliance. You have to maintain the copy of the CDLs, copies of their medical records, copies of their, MVRs and PSPs when it comes down to other paperwork related. So there's essentially lots of paperwork associated just with the hiring driver, right? Onboarding them and maintaining them as a driver or owner operator at that point doesn't really matter. You have to have a lot of legal paperwork that you must have it at all times on you, essentially what they call a driver folder, right? So we allow everything from basic driver management and compliance to order entry to order assignment to equipment entry and equipment assignment, making sure that you essentially have the right equipment connected to the right driver to the right trailer. Third party integrations that I mentioned earlier, I would say there's dozens, if not hundreds of third party integrations. When I say third parties, I mean things like fuel providers, your toll providers, right? Your roads that we pay for. Um, all of these are essentially need to be somehow collected from multiple different places, databases, websites, providers, portals, and you need to somehow manage all this information. And this is exactly what we do. We help you to essentially put that data together under kind of like a one roof and one box, right? In order for you to efficiently manage it. So we don't just let you go into the system and kind of customize it to however we want. We have a certain flow and within the system already because we know what parts of information coming from where, how to structure them, how to handle them more efficiently, how to create a driver's settlement later based on all of that information, amount of miles driven, amount of fuel spent, amount of, hours, tolls, amount of whatever else that you're required to, keep track on the road off, as well as, additional layers of functionality when the driver compliance. Things like accidents, right? They're unfortunate, but they do happen. So we allow you to track, records of your accidents, records of your, claims if there, God forbid, damage of your shipment in transit, right? That information needs to be recorded. There's about 137 different things that you need to keep track of, right? And we're essentially that software that allows you to do that efficiently.
So I can imagine that your customers are not knocking your door because they have a lot of accidents.
No,
This is
that's not
something
necessarily.
that is no, this is something in addition to the software. What are the main reasons that customers come to UNIQ TMS and choose
Well,
you instead of Samsara, for example?
well, Samsara is really more of different type of platform. We do have quite a bit of competition on our side as well in sorts of management software. We specifically, again, focus on, like, Samsara usually handles, they're what they call themselves a telematic platform, right? They're a bridge between you and an office, your driver, your hours of service, which is ELD, right? Electronic login device for the hours of service. And they're also a bridge between your equipment, for example, right? But that's kind of where it ends. They handle a lot of important information for you as well, but they're unable to handle all of the other things in the sense of, third party integrations, load entry, asset, equipment entry. They do have now some of them beginning to release the additional tools that help you manage your equipment a little bit, but it's all kind of in sections and in portions, right? So you're limited to however much functionality you have. We have, I don't know, 25 times the amount of that functionality in sense of tools and settings and additional layers of things that you can do within the system. And we also help you keep it organized well. A lot of people coming in to your answer your question, why do people knock on our doors, right? Or why do we come to them and try to explain how our tool can help them? A lot of people that begin within an industry, they have a very good understanding. They're usually either, ex dispatchers, operation managers, truck drivers, owner operators, whoever they might be within an industry, people who obviously understand how to run and operate business. But they often, when they come into the business, they kind of know it all and understand it all, but they don't necessarily have processes in place, right? Every business that goes through, growth, uh, should at least have an operational process in place, right? How data is collected, how data is generated, where it's stored, how it's used, and those are the little pieces of information that help you structure your operational process within the company. And a lot of people, if they have the understanding of the process, they often struggle to all put it together in an operational way, in the sense of where do I store all this information, how do I look for it, do I put it in the folder and store it in my drawer in the desk, or where does that information resides, what do we do with it, right? And when the years go by, that information piles up and it becomes somewhat unmanageable, unsearchable, and unusable. Guess what? A year or two goes by, no matter of question, the audit, the DOT, the Department of Transportation, the audit comes to you and they begin to ask questions. How do you hire your drivers? How do you onboard your drivers? How safe are you? How do you keep this? How do you keep that? They're essentially asking all the questions that in a 9 out of 10 times people don't have answers to. Or if they do have answers to, they're very limited in accessing that data, how quickly they can search for some data. And that's where we come in. We don't just come in as a software that allows you to store your paperwork or keep things in check. We come in as a software that help you organize your processes. Each company has their own differences, right? Little differences, larger differences depending on the type of equipment they handle, and so on and so forth. But we manage like 90% of the time, 90% of the processes within the companies, and we understand because myself and the rest of the team that we work together with, we come from transportation in the past, so we understand most of the needs, right? Therefore we kind of, our attempt was to create a software that could allow 90% of the companies to help establish that process in
Yeah.
place and make sure if they if they do not have a sense of how something should be done, we also help them do that partially, right? Because we don't just give them the tool and let them kind of play with it and see how it can be handled. We onboard them, we take them through the whole, we go in and we understand their existing step by step day-to-day life within, within their operations. And then we kind of help them and onboard them and guide them to how we think things should be run more optimistically and more, sufficiently in a way.
But this is in a later phase in the customer journey, because you know what I'm doing, right? I'm advising mostly cybersecurity companies in go to market, and if you with regards to cybersecurity, the message to new prospects is quite difficult, because
Yes.
nobody likes to spend money on cybersecurity
Yes.
because it doesn't add something. It's mostly an insurance to something that might happen, and sometimes it is just a catalyst if there's something's wrong or something's happening, mostly on a Friday evening, by the way, then all of a sudden it's important. So my father was used to be a truck driver, and it is not typically a job from 9 to 5. He was often was away with his truck from Monday morning till Friday evening late, long hours. I think your customers have to deal with the same situation. They make long hours, they work hard, but you need to be in there. Need to be there. There must be a certain moment that they think, yeah, UNIQ TMS should be the solution for our problems. Is it only when they're being audited, or is there also some positive messaging around your solution? And I mean, mostly from entering new prospects.
You are absolutely correct. Our customer base, not necessarily our customer base specifically for Unique TMS, are not drivers. Our customer base are companies that hire those drivers, right?
Okay.
They're the people that are essentially in the office. They're the ones who organize the shipments. They're the ones who book those loads. They're the ones who talk to the brokers. They're the ones who talk to the shippers. They're the ones who do the all the accounting and safety and compliance and due diligence on, how things should be done, right? And yes, a lot of these people are also spend a long hours, but they're just long hours in the office instead of in the truck, right? And your comparison to cybersecurity is somewhat, relatable. People don't come to us because they want the TMS. We're somewhat of a, I wouldn't call it a luxury product, but we're somewhat of a necessity product that you must have. Not the one that you want to have, the one that you need to have. You know what I mean? So there's a difference between having something cool and fun and interesting versus something, like making that appointment to the doctor. You don't want to go there, but you will have to one day. So that's kind of this inevitability and sense of inevitability is present. And not everyone like it, not everyone wants it, but they know they have to. And in fact, I had many customers that I would be on a, sales or onboarding calls with, and they would like just like all of them almost say that you'd be like, you know what, I know I don't, I know it's difficult, I know it's going to take time, but I know I have to have it. I know it. My friends telling me, my colleagues within the business, within the partners telling me that one day I'll have to go out there and get it. And it's a somewhat of a painful, unpleasant, difficult process that makes you essentially, make difficult decisions sometimes in a sense of operational stuff, right?
Yes.
And therefore, it's a very complex and a very structured product that requires, attention, that it requires efforts on your side, and requires your team to be, it requires good communication, requires your team to be well structured in sense of understanding who does what, who's responsible for what, so that we don't overlap one another within the system, right? So we don't produce a unusable data because, whatever the quality of your data is going to be on a out, on a exiting end, whatever that means, whatever you've put in. So if you put a garbage in, you're going to get garbage out, right? So you want to make sure the data going in is a is a quality data essentially, right? You don't want to be inputting random things that will never later produce anything for you. And that's where one of the things that I kind of wanted to specifically talk about. I think that brings us to the point where most of the people don't understand, or they don't know how to understand that saying. And I'm
Yes.
sure most of people heard many times. There's something called technological debt, and I'm sure you've used in your own, in cybersecurity. What technological debt is essentially um, something that you kind of create, right? That's you're at that stage where you think you don't need a technology, right? You think you understand it, you think you can handle with whatever tools you have. It might be an email, G Suite, spreadsheets, whatever that might be, Excel spreadsheets, right? And the longer you kind of wait, the greater the debt grows, right? So it and it's extremely kind of difficult to explain, right? Um, how do you the day you start, um, let's say a trucking company with one, 5 or 10 trucks, you start kind of logging that technological debt. Let's say you don't have anything or you have basic spreadsheets, right? You start logging that technological debt. So things like not having integrations with ELD providers, not having integrations with third-party providers such as fuel, for example, right? Tolls, whatever that might be. And the longer you go without having the proper integration in place, essentially, deliberately that you're not doing something, you're putting off something because, you're too busy, too many things are happening, you're whatever, you don't have time, you don't have the budget, something that's causing that, right? That. And the longer you put out, the taller that grows. And that's where most people don't realize that you'll eventually, if you are in the business for the long run, and if you are planning on continuing growing, and you're planning on essentially structuring your company, you will have to pay that debt down eventually. It's
Yes.
just a matter of time. How long is going to take you to pay that debt down, and are you ready for it? So yeah, a lot of companies that begin, they often also come to me and say, listen, I just started. I only have 3 or 4 trucks rolling for me. I don't have a whole lot of an operational process in place yet, but I know that, either myself or from the future or my friend told me that I should begin structuring my operations from the day one, essentially, using some sort of TMS, some sort of software that'll help me keep things, in place. And often it's a very difficult thing to do at the beginning, but companies that do that, they are extremely, a lot more successful at their, future plans for growth, or whatever that might be related to audits or something else,
Yes.
because they understand that the day one they began doing something. It's like a habit of, making notes for yourself, making
Yeah.
plans for yourself.
So,
Exactly similar to that.
so actually, you are saying that although it's in technological depth, right? Yeah, you're increasing your debt, and on a certain moment, you have to invest in this kind of management software. But now you change the story, the narrative completely, because as soon as you start working with TMS, the entrepreneur or your customer has a foundation to grow. So this is a positive aspect on
Correct,
paying your
but
debt.
the biggest issue that most people don't understand, that not because they're ignorant or anything, right? But simply because it's too overwhelming, because we understand that, right? We get that it's difficult. And that by no means, a lot of customers out there searching for magic pill. They think they're gonna come to me or to somebody else. They're gonna pay us for the service, and all of their problems will disappear. Unfortunately, it's never the case. It's still never the case in our business, uh, s- in our management software. Right? We cannot make your problems disappear. But if you begin using a proper software, the earlier the better in your transportation journey, you will have less issues in the future. So essentially, that's a very simple way to put it. It is not as simple as it sounds, operationally, but it's as easy you can put it in a few sentences. The earlier you'll begin investing into the technology, into the essentially paying down that debt. Like this 20/80 rule, kind of, putting at 20% of your income or whatever, 20% of your revenue aside, or however many percent depending on your size, right? To invest into technology, to invest into learning something new, to to assess your risks, to understand what are you putting yourself into, the more successful and safer you are going to be in the future when you're trying to grow, when you're trying to scale, you know, uh, your performance overall, your data overall. Even if you're gonna, let's say, if you're gonna decide to sell the company later, right? And you'll try to estimate your, what have been done for past years, right? What are the processes that are in place, how your company is structured, right? It is a lot easier to do that when you have everything in place, recorded in a management software, rather than try to, dig it up out of the, paper folders or spreadsheets elsewhere. So
What I like about you, Terry, is you're not pretentious. You just say how it is.
yes, because that's the thing with that the reason I've been somewhat successful and doing what I'm doing, because I am saying how things are,
Yes.
because I don't want to, build a fake layer of expectations between you and the company and the technology, and thinking that, you're going to subscribe for a new thing and it's going to make your problems disappear. No, that is never the case. Technology does not solve our problems. Technology helps us to manage our problems better, safer, more efficient, understand them faster, and essentially face our problems and understand that you have a tool that will help you deal with it. It goes the same way for any other technology out there, no matter if it's the smartest or the dumbest technology. The new wave of AI, and which is not essentially AI, but it's a whole different conversation, right? Um, it's all everything is a tool, but you need to know how to use it and when to use it, right?
I fully agree with you. And but it's again, and maybe you recognize, Terry, with the new wave of AI, you see a lot of users think they have found the magic solution to all the problems. AI, it's gonna solve everything.
And it's
While
not.
I
No.
no, while us, I say to my customers, first you need to have a process in place before you can use tooling like AI to optimize or the recurring to things you're currently doing, right? Daily routine. Then you can optimize.
Because if you don't know what you're asking, you're asking a question, but what kind of question are you asking, right?
Exactly. So at the end, everybody is disappointed.
There's a saying, play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yes.
So same thing. If you do not have a structure in place, so like for example, we have a lot of customers, our own, that are um, talk about because they hear it, they see it, right? Everybody's trying to, it's a new buzzword, AI, right? Everybody's trying to sell you AI. Everybody's, try to sell you that magic pill. And unfortunately, none of these are magic pills, and they probably never will be, or not in the near future. In order for the AI tools to, help you in any meaningful way, they need to work with your database. So every tool, every software, every management software today that offers some sort of AI helper, AI something, they're essentially saying that we're going to take your data, right, that you've input into your technology. It could be compliance technology, it could be just storage of documents. They're going to take that data and they're going to have that, you know, robotic, computerized brain of theirs look into this information and do something with it, right? It's either compare it, manage it, store it, delete it, clean up, whatever, right? But if that tool, if that entity, device, call it whatever you want to call it, works with unstructured and unorganized and or maybe in some cases non-existent pieces of the information, then it's going to produce exact same result. It's going to
Yes.
produce a result that is not worth of your time. It's not going to. It could potentially. speed up a certain things for you, right? It could help you, analyze, let's say, 20, 30, 50, 100 data points a lot faster than you would do it manually. Absolutely. That is an absolute use case for that. But it will not magically do things for you that you do not have in the system, or things that you're thinking that you can automate because somebody is not qualified or lazy or not trained well on something. Yeah.
I fully agree. So if I go back to what you're saying towards your customers, you're not promising them the world. You're promising
Absolutely.
a foundation to grow, to scale, and to see what's happening, and to improve their current processes. I can An educated guess is that your customers in 3, 6, or 9 months come back to you and say, "Well, I'm very satisfied. I'm very happy with the software UNIQ TMS." Because you set certain expectations, and all of a sudden, they see that they can do new things with your software.
They don't necessarily say the way you just said it, but
Yeah.
yes, they, in a
Okay.
way they do. The reason that so each there's a metric in each, technology, in each software. I'm sure in your field there's similar metric. Lifetime of the customer, right? A lot of customers don't understand that or think of it in that way, or some do. So each company provides a service has a metric such as lifetime of the customer, right? For example, how long an average customer sticks with the company for reason of using their technology, essentially, right? I I'm not gonna make up numbers or lie about it. I think I've read it somewhere. I'm don't quote me on that, but I think I've read it somewhere that average ELD customer in US, the companies that are provide services such as ELD, the tracking, monitoring, the kind of stuff, their customer lifetime is on average anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So meaning that customer signs up with the service, their lifetime with that service anywhere between 3 to 6 months. Obviously, there are customers that would stick with you for 5 years, right? And there are others that would only stick with you for a month or two, whatever, right? That's why average is 3 to 6. In our case, average customer lifetime is upwards of 2 years. Reason being is the complexity of technology. Not because we wanted to make it complex, but the nature of technology requires the certain level of complexity. And essentially, because of that, the onboarding and implementation process, especially if we're talking about larger fleets and larger companies, is
Yes.
extremely difficult because you got, 3 to 4 to 5 different departments that you have to train on, that you have to make sure, the communication is well understood, that they understand the flow, that they understand an operational process. Therefore, they have to spend a significant amount of time training those people. They're essentially looking at that as well as like an investment, right? They have to invest their own time into onboarding with us or themselves in that
Yes.
case with the technology. Therefore, we had companies that spent almost 3 to 4 months onboarding just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that the flow in the system is correct, that everything's matches, and they can begin going live essentially, right? So that is an investment on their part, and that's a big one.
Yes.
Therefore, you know, my main goal always to make sure that no matter the size of the company, when the company signs up, that they're seeing, and what they're seeing from me presenting to them or from whoever else is presenting it to them is to make sure that their existing flow, uh, we will be able to replicate within the management software. Because their biggest issue is if for some reason they're not able to implement or replicate their existing flow into our technology, it
Yes.
becomes a problem for them. They can no longer do something, for example, or they would have to utilize something else, right? Some other software technology or a spreadsheet or whatever, right? To handle that. Our goal is to completely eliminate, not eliminate our competition, but eliminate them having to use 5 different things. Our goal is to make sure that they can open a laptop or computer, open the, TMS, and have everything at their fingertips, accessible, whatever amount of information they can potentially input in there. It's all in one place. That's our main goal, right? And that is where kind of our success lies, because we have, most of our team comes with a huge background. I've spent 13 years in logistics myself. I've done everything from operations to dispatching to booking loads to you name it, right? So our goal is to understand and make sure that the current customer is going to be able to utilize technology to the fullest. Because if I know the customer is onboarding with me and he or she is not able to utilize that technology to the fullest, that's not going to be a successful customer of mine. That's not going to be a long-term customer. I know they're not going to be happy with technology. We had cases like that where people would come to us and say, listen, we're doing this, and that. For example, we had a lot of companies that would come to us from car hauling business. It seemed to be all, similar. It seemed to be all simple, taking shipments from point A to point B, but unfortunately it is not. There's a quite a bit of differences within the technology and processes within companies that are required. Um, Therefore I'll be straight up with them. I'll listen, I know it's not going to work for you. We had customers in the past that they're tried to implement that technology for the car hauling companies, and unfortunately, the car hauling company market is not big enough in US to. There are a couple of providers out there that do certain things for them, but they're not, they're not large enough to I guess continue the development, right, and betterment of the existing software. Therefore, there's another layers of tools that are essentially missing from their technology. And what these companies do, they come to us and they say, well, can we somehow take your software and optimize to work in our scenario? In some cases, we can do that, but there are some cases that it's absolutely impossible, unless there's a significant change to an existing processes within our existing software. Therefore, I'll be straight up with these people. I'll tell them, listen, you can here's your free trial, try it, look at it, but I know already because we've done that in the past. I know you're not going to be successful at it because X, Y, and Z.
Well, it also saves, it is straightforward. It is what it is. So they also
Yeah.
see that if you say this won't work, they can easily accept it. If you say it will work, then they say, all right, you can make it happen, right? It says something about yourself and as a trusted advisor towards your customers and prospects. What are the biggest challenges you have with UNIQ TMS? Because you also have the dynamics with sales and marketing and also software development. How do you see this?
I would say the biggest challenges on the our side, well, customer side, biggest challenges with TMS is always selecting the right product and an implementation, right? And
Yeah.
that mostly never changes because that is their goals, right? They're select the right product and implement it correctly. And they don't just like I said, they don't just come to us strictly for obtaining a software from us. They come to us and they often listen to us because we speak their language. They understand that we recommend them something. We don't just sell them something for a reason for selling something. We recommend them a structural operational product that we know they're going to be able to use, right? Our biggest challenge, however, is I would say probably because of the competition and not necessarily even competition, but because of the variety of the providers, third party providers, load boards, fuel providers, toll providers, factoring companies, and many, many different other, third parties that are our customers working with for one reason or another, is to have them all, you know, unanimously integrated within environment of some sort. Unfortunately, that's not the case for different reasons, right? Good or bad. Some people see competition, some people see difficulties, investing time or money into integrating. So that was our biggest challenge. We spent hundreds and hundreds of hours, reaching out to third party providers, finding the right, products that helps us aggregate, those third party providers, all into the like a one platform, or make sure that their data flows properly into our system. Because all the customer wants, he customers don't want to deal with it and understand it. That's our job, right? They don't know the details about how information gets from their portal to us and then to them eventually, right? That's our challenge. And I think that that was, as far as it was the challenge in 2017, it has gotten a lot better now, since, a lot of people made a lot of changes to the way they handle information, and not a lot of new technology came around. But it's still a great challenge for us to aggregate and obtain data from other providers to make sure it's well structured, and then that we can do something with that data to actually, you know make it usable for the customer.
Yeah. But this is mainly from a data engineering perspective. With regards to the company itself, because you mentioned already some competition, how can you make yourself visible within the market? Because you have to deal with maybe the customers are quite homogenic; they look the same. But if you have to deal with so many third-party providers, I can imagine you can only focus on one thing.
There is a certain layer of competition. Third party providers are not necessarily our competition. Our competition are essentially products that trying or going after exact same customer, right? That we are. The ones that can offer similar or the same tools and solutions for that same customer, right? And I would say there's a lot of them out there. There's some healthy competition out there for sure. The Due to the complexity and due to the industry specific layers of needs for the customers, there's only a handful of TMSs out there that directly compete with us, because you need to remember there's also differences in the markets and needs of those markets. So for example, if you're a trucking company with 5 to 10 trucks, your needs are on a specific level. Your needs are, let's say you wanted to have 2 or 3 integrations, you wanted to have, ability to create settlements for the drivers and something else. So they're needs, but they're somewhat relatively basic, those needs, right? If you're what we call a medium to large size company, you are like, let's say 25 to 50 trucks fleets, right? You're still doing the same thing. You're hauling the loads from point A to point B, but your needs, operational needs, are a lot different now,
Yes.
because you have different volume, you have different level of or needs for maintenance, you have different structure for safety, for everything. You're essentially doing the same thing, but times five. So that becomes
Yes.
more complex, right? You need more layers of processes and understanding of process, so on and so forth. And if you what we call an enterprise level, 150 plus trucks, whatever, we have customers of that size. There's not many of them, but they're out there. There's probably a dozen or so customers that are like, 150 plus trucks sizes, right? Their needs are, again, they're absolutely on a different level. And I'm sure you can relay within the technology within your sector that's exactly the same problem. Depending on your size, even though you're doing the same thing, your needs are completely different for
Yes.
that reason. Therefore, same way TMSs, management software programs, they are the same way. They're ones that handle smaller fleets, right? They're working well with owner operators with the smaller fleets. They're handling well their needs. There are enterprise companies out there. They're like McLeod, for example, right? They've been around since the 80s. They have a well structured operational. I actually used myself McLeod in the past. Like there's TMW. There are a few other giants out there that are essentially can handle anything and everything you need, right? You, like from A to Z. One big issue with these companies, they're extremely expensive. They're not just expensive, they're extremely expensive. So, like, you'll be looking of upwards of $100,000 plus if you're talking about larger fleets like 150 trucks or more. You'll be paying way north of $100,000 a year to buy it, to keep it, to maintain it, support it, so on and so forth. We're fitting in somewhere in the middle. We're not. designed for small fleets. We're not designed for full blown enterprise, complex setups with thousands of trucks. We handle, anywhere between 25, 30 trucks to about 250 trucks. That's like our sweet spot. We know we can handle 99% of the companies with 90% of their issues they have, right? And we wanted to make sure that our technology is kind of good enough to answer all sorts of different questions for different companies. So it depends how you kind of position yourself within this market. And if we're talking about our medium-sized market, there's only about 3 or 4 other companies that are our direct competition on the pricing at the pricing point and at functionality point essentially.
All right, that is quite clear. You have a clear view of the competition. Where is UNIQ TMS in 3 years from now? What is the vision? What's the goal?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's goal is obviously to grow. We grew on our own money, on our own investments, and on our own essentially income from our subscribers and people that are investing their time and money into paying us for our service, right? Um, there's a goal in the sense of you know dollar amount, right? And then there's a goal in a technological sense of right where we want it to be technologically. um I would say if we can continue growing and deliver significant usable value to our customer, I would define that as a success, right? No matter how the dollar amount growth, because I think with you know with the technological success, with the high success rate of your customer and the long lifetime of your customer, you are helping your customer grow. Therefore, you're helping yourself grow financially, right? So it's really difficult to put a pin in a number or say we want to have that many customers or and to or it's really difficult market, right? To position yourself in correctly. Therefore, cannot predict or say flat out where we would want to be, but I do want to say that we would wanted to grow technologically and advance in a sense of tools and interesting features and advancements and sorry, not advancements, additional tools of the customer for the
Yeah.
customers, that customers can advance themselves into maybe automate a process or two or three within their day-to-day routines, and that automatically counts as a success on our side. That means we're simultaneously helping hundreds of the customers. In that case, each customer represents about 6 to 7 users. Therefore, you're talking about upwards of 1,000 people a day that are actively using our system.
I like your answer. It's not about the
Thank you.
money. It's not about certain goals. You really put the customer on
Well,
the
because
number
that's
one
where
spot.
the money comes from, right?
Yeah, but
That's
still, you first mentioned the customer. He should be happy. We said process is optimized for the customer, and then eventually the money will come. It's not your main goal. You're not your main driver. I like the answer.
because we are servicing the customer. Therefore, our customer is not going to give us the money for providing them something. It's plain that simple. Nobody's going to pay anything for the software that doesn't work for them, right? So,
This is also not pretentious. It is what it is, and the customer first. Where are you, Terry? What are your personal goals in 3 years from now?
oh man, that's a difficult question. um, there was a lot going on. There was a lot going on in a lot of senses right around us on everyday basis. I'm just hoping that I can continue to grow professionally. I've ended up in this industry absolutely on accident. I've never expected myself to continue growing myself as a professional in within the transportation industry, uh, and continue my journey specifically in technology, software development, and face that side of the fence because I've spent so many years in logistics, right?
Yes.
But I would just to continue to grow professionally as a someone within an industry who can help others and who can help them on a technological level, right? Because not everybody is technologically advanced or versed well in all this, and I feel like I can be used well out there within the industry.
I like it. You're a modest guy.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you say the right things. Terry, I want to thank you for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. Your story
Thank
about
you.
the company itself, the software development, also the things you said about the AI and the tooling, it all makes so much sense. If you don't consider everything the magic bullet or the silver bullet.
Yeah,
Stay focused on what you like to do, focus on your customers, make your customer happy, and eventually the other things will follow.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Terry, thanks again for the conversation.
Thank you, Edwin, for inviting. Yes, and thank you for supporting the talk. I've watched a few of your videos, by the way, briefly. I haven't had much time to sit through the whole hour of them, but there's a lot of interesting people on your channel so far. Yeah,
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. And I suggest to stay in touch and let's see where what journey will bring
absolutely.
you.
Maybe we will, 6 months or a year from now, we'll follow up with another one.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll have more interesting topics to discuss for sure.
absolutely. Already, we'll schedule something already in the calendar. Thank you so much, Terry. And we speak soon.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye.